It's starting. Just a little pinwheel here. Sorry, folks. Brief pause and we'll... Oh, come on. All right, we were going to play the intro music, but for some reason my iTunes just crashed, so we're going to get into it. And there it goes. The Change My View podcast, the second attempt at a live podcast. We are still learning, still rough edges here a little bit. Here with Snorlax, the founding moderator of Change My View. And we'll just
hello, everybody.
A little bit. And coming from Pacific time zone here, me Hatch, Michael Hatch here at Thunder Studios in Long Beach, California. And yeah, thank you for tuning in if you're listening live or later. How you doing, Snorlax?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I've got to I gotta kill the next song on iTunes. Sorry. All right, bonus. I'll give free gold to anyone who can identify that song. Okay, so there's audience engagement, right? Okay, so yeah, here with Snorlax. How's everything going?
Yeah, very well. Looking forward to this. Hopefully we take some of the suggestions from last time on board.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we've got the feedback here from last week. What are you seeing here, Snorlax?
Well, first of all, hopefully the audio is slightly better. I have raised my microphone closer to my mouth with the help of a Richard Branson autobiography. So, yeah, we don't have the best microphones, but trying to make do for now. What other suggestions were there?
So I'm going to do a screen share now so you folks can see what some of the feedback was from last week. And if you're listening again, and this is your feedback, thank you very much for taking the time to do it. And let's take a look. So this is last week's post. I'm just going to, the top response here is from user Your Opinion, with opinion but spelled with the U. And what they say is CMV is a perfect sub to marry with the podcast. I enjoy it when you have a guest from the sub. I would suggest it would be very interesting to hear from a post that is unresolved. If you could have two or more of the best opposing positions, you would be providing new information that was not available on the sub. I'm kind of new here, so I'm not sure what you got in the past, but I would assume there are some repeating topics that remain unresolved. Yeah, well, we definitely get repeat topics, right?
Yes, certainly.
And that's an interesting thought to say, okay, well, if an issue is resolved, is it like, have we found the right opinion on it? And I think that's something we would definitely back away from claiming, right? That we're not necessarily making a collection of correct opinions found here, right?
Yeah, it's tricky. Are we looking for truth in all cases, or looking for a common ground, or et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so as much as it would be useful in some future to have a perfect library of all resolved arguments, for now, we're just, it's more about incubating a community of, polite discussion and having that discussion take place as a healthy place to do it. But that being said, unique topics that are out there that aren't talked about every day that, we do get some that repeat a lot. Those are always really fun. And a lot of them come in lighthearted categories. We'll touch on a couple of those towards the end of the show of these fun posts more than the serious ones. But I do appreciate the feedback. And Snorlax, do you want to maybe talk a little about what user Jonta here as the second item on feedback said?
Yeah, so first of all, they talked about Pocket Casts. I don't know how many people listening right now use that site. And you deal with the file side of things anyway, but apparently they didn't know it was live. Maybe that's something we can fix going forward, but so they did point out that the audio quality last time was quite bad, which, yeah, listening back, I think I agree.
Yeah, totally. So
we have what kind of microphone do you have, Michael?
So I've got the Blue Yeti here. Last time I was using the default MacBook microphone because I was having some problems with the computer pointing to the wrong place, and I ended up just unplugging everything and going with what worked. Yeah.
But in this case, Zoom H1.
This is Zoom H1, you said?
Yeah, it's a Zoom H1. I use it for recording song ideas, etc. But it kind of doubles up as a USB mic as well. But like I said at the start, I've raised it slightly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, cool. Well, and then I think these are both going to be better than our default laptop mics for sure. So, and then we'll keep please keep giving us the feedback. I'll probably try and add some sound deadening in this room as well. And we'll keep improving with each episode. We'll keep putting them out, and so we won't let the perfect get in the way of the good, huh? So there's a third one here. Audio not level after the fact. I think. Would you say we fold that in kind of with the same answer, or just keep working at it? And
yeah. Hopefully we figure it out.
Cool. Show notes almost non-existent. Yeah, I'm gonna try and get in a better habit here with that. For now, the notes, the best resources to get information on the sub and the podcast are going to be in the wiki and in the podcast sticky posts themselves, which I believe past ones could be found in the wiki too, right? If you're looking for the old episodes.
Yep, you can see it in the screen share just now. CMV podcast episodes, we've got them all linked
So if you're
over there.
Yeah, so if you look at the screen share here, you can see CMV podcast episodes highlighted there. Go right there. That's the place. That's if you're watching visually. If you're listening only, it's on the right-hand side just above where it says submission rules. Okay, and the last thing, I think, positive stuff here to balance the above, copy pasta as many times as needed. So he's like, yeah, just imagine some nice things. That's taken in the spirit it's meant, John. So thank you. We do appreciate the feedback.
Yes. Also, I think the commenter above you mentioned getting guests in, which is something we're definitely interested in doing going forward. I did look around today for some active posts that perhaps the participants would want to join. Nothing stood out at me today. But perhaps in the future, if we have people joining us live or knowing when to join us live, we can actually have some back and forth with the people who actually join the stream, perhaps. So,
okay, and I am just adding. We may have a third person that may join us in a bit. I'm just sending them the invite, and if and when they're ready, they will just hop on. We don't want to get too far ahead of them in case something comes up and they can't make it. So let me just do that invite here.
So this is one of our moderators who's going to join us in a bit about a post he made a couple of weeks ago about caller ID spoofing.
Actually, I don't have the email address. I don't know if you might have it handy, but if not, I'll wait.
We'll figure that out in a bit.
Yeah,
I'll get it.
No so worries. we won't get too deep in the weeds on that right now. But scrolling down here a little more, just looking at. Let me get back. So this is. Okay, so we're looking at the response from Jonta, and we appreciate that. Next one was from Barismus. User Borismus. Barismus really enjoyed it after the hiccups. Edits really are required, I think. Next time, please, more discussion around CMV-like ventures, such as, he brought up street epistemology, like that came up last time too. And the idea of one of the mods dropped about an asynchronous applause-free audio conversation platform. Gears are turning. Yeah, so I guess he bit onto your thoughts about applause getting in the way, both good and bad, right?
Yes. Yeah. So perhaps that hit a nerve. I think a lot of people agree with that. At least who I've spoken.
Yeah, and I think for our purposes, yeah, we will try to limit the applause here. That's for sure. Except for just now. Sorry. And the last response was me, just technical stuff. So. But yeah, we're hoping to just increase our engagement with you as far as this feedback. Keep letting us know what you want out of this. We know that this thing is not has grown so to fit this mold organically in a sense, and so your feedback's always helpful to kind of grow the podcast to where it needs to be as well. If that's a fair assessment, Snorflax.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, that gets us to the end of our first part. We just wanted to a look at your thoughts. And what was the next thing you wanted to step into here, Snorlax?
So a post caught my eye 4 days ago, which I thought would be interesting to get into. The title of which is "Change My View: Hard Times Create Strong Men Create Good Times Create Weak Men, and Weak Men Create Hard Times." So perhaps we can talk through how this discussion went down. It was quite a popular one.
Well, we've got a pretty short OP open up, so do you mind if I just maybe read that through here?
Yeah, sure.
And listening audience know it. So this was upvoted 1,470 times, submitted 4 days ago by user MLNZNZ. So this would have been seen likely on most people's front page in the top 40 or so, I'd guess. But the Change My View title is CMV: Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. And here's the text of the post is: let's put this in the context of history to be specific. For example, times when governments with authoritative policies are put into power, when the previous government, usually a democracy, is destabilized. Alternatively, an authoritative government, which was meant to keep things in order, starts becoming too oppressive. People will eventually start fighting for a more democratic one to replace it. I also think that wars / death / suffering are inevitable when this process is taking place. As long as resources are finite and people are different, there will be no end to conflict, thus keeping the cycle happening. My professor said that perhaps the wars and other conflicts need not happen, that maybe we can live in a world with perpetual good times and strong people and break the quote-unquote cycle, suggesting that there might be a solution to this. I, on the other hand, think that this philosophy is an essential part to the human experience. To learn the importance of struggle and the foolishness of being contented is not something you can just write down and teach to the younger generation. It's something that they themselves, which is why history keeps repeating itself. So what are your initial thoughts on that sort of post? And I don't know if you want to address more of the meta or the actual thing itself.
Yeah, well, like I said, I find this topic interesting. I've thought about it before. You know, I've the phrase "pressure creates diamonds," I guess, that comes to mind. And in fact, I was listening to Joe Rogan recently, who talked about a very similar thing. Apparently, you know, similar in the sense that bad times create like strong people, and he was saying that a lot of his comedian friends came from broken households, and for some reason that experience pushed them forward into creativity and drive and all sorts. And he also mentioned that children of luxurious backgrounds quite often become complacent and take things for granted. Obviously, these are generalizations.
Yeah.
And I think it relates to this post, you know, but it's interesting because if it's true, then what do you do about it? You know?
Yeah. So there's a part of it I really agree with, but a large part I really don't, because if at the end of the line, you know, more stability, more peace, better technology leads to a better life, well, then isn't that the goal? And if in that state of being we have to let down some of our guard, well, isn't that a good thing? You know, isn't that a kind of good progress? I mean, there are things already that we enjoy that our ancestors didn't. You know, we have refrigerators. We're not in a constant state of, you know, nasty, brutish, and short, don't know where the next meal comes from. You know, we live without those stresses and we're fine. And, you know, on a global scale, you know, pointing to, you know, Steven Pinker's Better Angels of Our Nature is, I think, the definitive work on this question is, you know, things have gotten better by every quantifiable metric. And if in that context it means we're a bit softer, cool, then that's great. Now we're free to do that. That's a plus. But there's a missing piece, I think. You know, I'm a non-believer, but I see that religion probably is an evolved, or spirituality, or whatever you want to define it, is an adaptive, evolved thing that helped us get where we are. You know, like, so I think there's something else also in us that, you know, and to go kind of pull from Joseph Campbell talking about initiation rites, especially with men, the importance of some kind of initiation challenge. And I think there's healthy ways to do that. Some kind of, you know, American Gladiators, boot campy kind of strong, you know, challenge context could fill that role. I mean, I feel like fraternity pledging and initiation for some do a piece of that. It's like you have to modulate for it. Like, okay, yeah, we have this easier world, but let's, you know, do some smart things to make sure we still can grow those mental muscles of toughness without becoming shut down, armed guard up all the time. You know, guys can't talk about their emotions. You don't. That maybe helped get us there, but don't need anymore as much as we can. I don't know. That's my personal take, but it's,
yeah.
You know, I don't know if that. I'd be more interested, I guess, in seeing what happened in the thread, huh?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that there's kind of, in my mind, there's kind of two things you can take from this. One is that does having a hard time leading to you being a stronger person, does that mean that necessarily you have a better influence on the world? Well, is that necessary if the world's already perfect in the kind of idealistic scenario? Well, perhaps not, but also there's this psychological effect of working hard and earning and going through a tough time, coming out of it and psychologically appreciating the end more. So it's kind of, it's, for example, in my life, the day after my last exam at university was just amazing. But, you know, a few weeks later, you get used to having no exams, and then the days just feel totally normal. But it's like that kind of getting through the tough thing. So there's like, I guess there's two elements, isn't there? There's the societal thing that I think this post refers to, and then there's the psychological appreciation, perhaps.
Yeah. So it's almost as if, okay, I see OP's point. Let's say OP's right. Well, then so what? You know, it's like hard solipsism. Okay, if we live in a simulation, so what? Like if that cycle's unbreakable, then we're stuck in it.
Yeah, exactly.
We're still trying to make the world better. It's not like we our hands up in the air. Like, well, I don't get what the second step of this project is. The first step being, okay, I'm going to establish that the hard times do this 4-step cycle. So what? Like at the end of the day, okay, so we just give up and not try to make the world a better place. Where's?
Yeah. I get it. Because I can buy into the strong men. You know, obviously we're using the language men here that the OP has used.
Actually, I'm glad you highlighted it. I'm trying to stick within the OP topic. We're not deliberately excluding any gender category.
Not at all. Yeah. No. But I can buy into the strong followed by weak, followed by strong, followed by weak thing. But there's kind of this assumption that the weak necessarily doesn't have to. They're kind of assuming that the weak part leads to undoing the good times. But perhaps we reach a point where the good times can't necessarily be undone that easily. And then we kind of just flow onwards in our meekness.
Yeah. And I think there's, you know, like LeBron James's schedule is probably extremely like rigorous and arduous and toiling hard. I mean, there are ways in the modern world to have challenge and flex those muscles, mental or physical. Still, you know, like even in some future world, I think that there's always going to be people are creative and inventive. We'll find ways to, I think, feed these needs to. There's always going to be, you know, I can't get the word. It's not changing. Growth isn't going to be perfect, but I think it's for the better. Yeah.
Yeah, there's already been that shift when it comes to like physical exercise, hasn't there? From doing it out of necessity to survive, moving towards doing it for your own health.
Yeah,
because you know sometimes you might fall into the mindset of I don't necessarily need to have a strong body in this day and age, but there's benefits mentally and in terms of confidence and all sorts of things. So it doesn't necessarily have to relate to survival.
Yeah, and I think even the lesson of like to risk a spoiler from Wall-E here. If you haven't seen Wall-E, there's a beginning of Act 3 spoiler here about part of the setting, but that. Then do you have any objection to hearing this? Have you heard this?
No, in fact, I was thinking
Okay.
this movie as well. I couldn't remember the name. I was thinking Up.
Oh yeah, no, Up's fantastic.
No, it's Wall-E.
In Wall-E, you've got those. And spoiler alert: there's a part where there's a bunch of people in the future, essentially on a giant cruise ship, just living out their lives with every luxury given to them, but they're all severely overweight. So I'm thinking, oh well, in the future, that can be solved too. It's like there's not really each of these problems that come with the potential futures. I think we're creative and invent enough to find problems. I noticed we are joined here now by the unpronounceable himself, HUADPE.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going, man?
It's going well. How are you guys?
Good. Just real quick, how would you like us to refer to you? As
Peter.
Username? Peter? Cool. All right. Welcome, Peter. So we were just discussing this post, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And since you're here, any thoughts on that or the thread itself and how that progressed?
I looked at the thread a little when it was up there. I didn't participate in it. I think I drafted something and then I realized I didn't really have anything useful to contribute, so I didn't actually post it. But I generally tend to think that it's just a pablum that's used as a justification for really bad dictators. That we can see for a particular historical example, World War I, World War II. World War I was a truly horrific war that devastated the European continent and devastated those populations in a way that's really, really hard for us to fathom today. The proportion of the population of Germany, of France, of Russia, of the United Kingdom that was just dead or severely wounded was shockingly high. And so by any possible stretch of the imagination, it was a very, very hard time and did nothing to forestall the militarism, or it did some large sociological impact, but it didn't stop another war from happening 21 years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point, I think.
There. Well, let me go in a little bit to the thread itself and maybe just read back the top 2 responses just to kind of give people listening just an audio a sense of what happened. So this is the top response, 446 upvotes, final points here because it's 4 days old, so that's probably pretty much set. From user Antifa Throwaway, spelled like it sounds. Okay, so this seems like a roundabout way for people who support the status quo and believe us to be falling away from it to call themselves strong and their opponents weak, i.e. an elaborate ego stroke. Basically just saying things were bad, then people made it better, and we made it great, so now the ungrateful people are trying to wreck it because they don't get how great I am and have been in all moments of history. I guess I'm just too awesome for my own good. Poor me. Then they continue, people have different ideas of what's authoritarian and what's not, and what's good times and what's not, based on your personal ideology. It's not an objective scale by any measure. This perspective of yours has many unspoken assumptions baked into it, both about what constitutes authoritarian societies and what constitutes good versus bad times. So, and I don't see a delta here. Do we know, did Opie give a delta on this?
Yes, it's in the top level comment above it. I think you went to the second top level comment.
Oh, weird. On my screen, I'm showing Antifa Throwaway as the top comment and his response, but I don't see a delta in ML in the OP's response.
Yeah, I think there was only one delta given, and it was in response to Nikki Fire.
Oh, okay.
Which is the top comment on my screen.
Oh, weird. Okay, so you're just seeing a different top comment, then they must be sort of different. Do you have that in front of you?
Yeah, I'll read that out. So Nikki Fire.
And this is what changed Opie's mind, just for the
yes. So Nikki Fire says, your view relies on a simplified notion of historical cycle between weak/strong men. I hope to show that your view is unsupported in regard to history and your counter-argument unrelated to any sense of historical principle. And so based on the quality of your supporting evidence, your view is only conjecture and is not valid in the realistic historical sense of human experience you present it. I ask that you accept the burden of proof to show how history illustrates this cycle using concrete historical narratives. If you cannot, I ask that your view be changed to an ideological one rather than a historical principle as you present it. Notice the unacknowledged distinction between ideology and pragmatism in your counter-argument. Quote, I, on the other hand, think that this philosophy is an essential part of the human experience. To learn the importance of struggle and the foolishness of being contented is not something you can just write down and teach the younger generation. Unquote. You seem to be speaking in a pragmatic historical sense elsewhere while refuting a counter-argument here in the ideal sense, a conflation that does not serve to support your view that history repeats this cycle. Your professor was pointing out that it's possible to imagine this world of peace and strength combined. Historical study is not based in ideology or imagination. This counter-argument in no way counters your pragmatic historical view and thus should not be used as a counter-argument for your purposes of refutation. Do you see how this is unrelated to your supported evidence? Furthermore, in the interest of changing your view, could you speak to why your initial example of authoritarian rule illustrates your point? It too is not sufficient to show how this is a true repeating cycle, as it does not have grounding in real history as presented. I read your World War I comment on Weimar and Hitler. I don't know if I pronounced the first right. This does not illustrate the cycle in regard to the weak/strong dichotomy. I don't know how to pronounce that, sorry. You present nothing about the Weimar Republic involved weak men and nothing about Hitler was strong except his voice. If you cannot present sufficient supporting evidence from history to demonstrate a principle of weak/strong historical contingency, then I ask that you change your view to incorporate the notion that your view is pure conjecture. Well, that was some comment.
Yeah, Ed, I got nothing to add to that. Yeah. MLN ZNZ, the OP here, says, consider my view changed, though I'm not quite ready to let go of the quotes message. You have made a great point when you distinguish it from me using it as an ideology and trying to fit it into the context of history. Reading all comments below made me realize that there really were holes in my argument when I try to apply historical trends. One of them is vague definitions of terms like quote unquote good times or strong men, etc. And whose definition of it exactly? I still have my reservations concerning the German example, a country suffering from massive inflation and poverty, suddenly turning into a world power that has conquered Europe would surely pass for a weak to strong transition. No, but also they left a delta. So it sounds like the correction here really, or the delta here is given as a category correction. Is that a correct read on this, I think?
Yes, I think so.
I would add something for anyone who's interested in that. A couple of one recommendation for a book that's a very good history of the subject is William Schreier's Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which goes in really pretty good detail over how the Nazi Party came to power in Germany and eventually how the whole thing collapsed because Hitler was a megalomaniacal crazy person who kept invading people when it was a really bad idea. On the economic point, Schreier doesn't say this specifically, but it's actually a very good case to be made that it was an inflationary policy caused by Hitler's rearmament that helped the German economy. Because essentially, in order to keep it secret, they had to print a bunch of money without telling anyone, which solving the problem of the Great Depression was because no one had been printing money. Ben Bernanke and a guy named James, whose first name I forget, wrote a very good paper on the subject about how as countries printed more money and got off the gold standard during the Great Depression, it basically corresponds perfectly with when they stopped having a giant depression.
I had no idea about that. That's actually super interesting. Any chance you might have a note we could add to the show notes for a link to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can find you a couple of links to the things I just mentioned, and I'm sure someone's written about the German inflation and the secret money printing and their economic recovery.
Yeah,
I could probably find a link or two about that.
That's awesome, man. Thank you. Yeah, no, I didn't realize that was it's almost, it's weird. It's like the society is storing its work or secretly borrowing in some kind of like investment fund of future.
If you're going to get me into monetary policy theory, this is going to be a long conversation. I find it really interesting. I can spend 30 minutes off the top of my head on monetary policy if you want.
Well, I guess what I was trying to parallel was that in the sense that in a more cultural sense, outside of the financial, it's like they're lending themselves future strength, not just money, but like, I guess it's some kind of psychological lending to themselves in the future secretly.
There are definitely psychological elements to the theory of money, but it's a whole bag of worms, and I don't want to start opening that bag of worms unless we want to spend 30 minutes on that subject, which I don't think we do.
Yeah, no. Okay. I got you there. Any other thoughts on this one, Snorlax, or did you, now that you're here, Peter, we can maybe jump to yours unless you had more on this.
No, I'm fine. Jump to the other one.
I was just going to say, speaking of money, I've been watching the Bitcoin price all day.
Well, I should post on that. I think that's I should post I think it's a bubble thing, but I don't know if that would be so productive.
Well, you can see they're hearing now the creation of a Change My View post in real time. This is the excitement of this podcast. So if
maybe, yeah.
Well, I guess, I just bought in for the first time the other day, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, makes me regret my decision.
My view is wrong.
Oh, is it falling right now?
Yeah, and that's why I've been buying in.
Oh man. Okay. All right. Well, then the post that we reached out to you, Peter, moderator HUADPE, was this was between you and who was the other moderator that you had the exchange with?
Almost every member of the mod team ended up participating in this post. I had exchanges with Cashflow and with Mehatch where they both got deltas though.
Let's see. Okay, so I'm just trying to find the link here. I had it up in a tab.
Or I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm talking to you. That's why it was Cashflow and Suze who got deltas there. I think you might have participated too.
I don't think I was in that one.
Yeah, that was it.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to find it now, and I had the link ready, and then. All right, this is caller ID. Here we go.
Yeah.
So this is your post. So maybe a good way to open would be for you to read your submission in your own voice.
If you want me to read the whole thing, I can. Sure.
Well, I mean, you've got it pretty short here, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So caller ID spoofing is the practice of transmitting digital information with a phone call, representing the number as the dialing number, and other than the number that's actually dialing. So to explain that, it's basically like, if I spoof a number, I've sent 555-1212 when I'm really calling from 555-3434 or whatever. And so I said, I believe this practice should be made entirely illegal, and either the accurate calling number or else no number must be transmitted. Spoofing is overwhelmingly used by scammers and spammers, and is a major technique of fraud. While some users have an interest in spoofing, which is more legitimate, those interests can generally be accommodated through just blocking caller ID and displaying no number. Because spoofing is so prevalent in illegal and deceptive activity, and because it is inherently deceptive, and because legitimate users of the service have a non-deceptive alternative, I think it should be banned, and that the government should promulgate a regulation to telecommunications companies banning the practice entirely.
So let me just ask you a clarifying question real quick, because if you had asked me before this post, and I would have assumed it already was illegal.
It is not.
So what is the current law, and what is an example of an actual legitimate reason not?
Sure. So I'll go into one of the deltas that I gave here, because that actually goes into why I gave that delta of the legitimacy of the use. So a very good example is a large business may have a single incoming number that they want to give out to people. So if you're a hospital, you may have a front desk number, which is staffed 24/7, which can direct you to wherever in the hospital. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of sub phone numbers for every department, every doctor's office, every billing person, you're going to have a whole bunch of sub of individual numbers for individual desks, which may or may not be manned, but you're going to have this general number that's always got someone at it to send your call there. And so you want people to see when you call outbound from the hospital, you would show them the general call number so that when they call back, they're always going to get someone to answer their call. Even though they're in the actual call is going from whatever desk called them, the billing desk or the cardiac desk or the emergency room desk or wherever. And so that was one of the examples that I ended up giving a delta for, because I recognized that it actually is important, especially there where you really, really want to send people to somewhere that actually is going to get an answer, that it was quite important that they be able to spoof the number to a number that they own legitimately, but it shows up in the caller ID as a useful number as opposed to a number that may just ring off the hook or may go to voicemail when someone may have an emergency.
Gotcha. Okay. And so this, from what you were saying, we got sort of a who's who here showed up in the thread to engage in this, and we have, I think it's Ansu's at the top here, right? My browser's just.
Yeah. So I had a long conversation with him where I actually did not give him a delta. This was, so there is a regulation that exists, and you can probably scroll down and say, we talked about it a little bit, and we can read off some of what was said, or I can summarize it.
If you want, for some reason my scrolling is not.
Yeah, I have it also up in front of me.
Cool.
So, Ansu's points out that, and this got the most upvotes of anyone, so it's fairly popular, that what I was saying was already illegal. He said, the FCC rule requires that under the Truth in Caller Act, FCC rules prohibit any person or entity from transmitting misleading or inaccurate caller ID information with the intent to defraud, cause harm, or wrongfully obtain anything of value. And they said the problem is that the people who are scammers are already engaging in illegal and unethical actions and have systems in place to protect themselves, like shell companies are working from overseas, and that because they're willing to break the law, they're not going to be able to also worry about this minor FCC law that I'm proposing.
Oh, okay. And so you clarified about
right. So
this is what happens a lot in Change My View. Just if I can get a little meta here, is that it's a chance to clarify your points. I think this is one of the healthier things, is that like you're like, okay, great point, but let me make sure you understand. This is you saying I want to remove the intent requirement. In other words, you're saying I don't care what their intent is, just make it a flat rule.
Well, that's one part of it. The other part I was also wanted to clarify is that my rule, the way it's structured now, because it has an intent requirement, the prohibition is sent to the person who is sending the call, who may be overseas or maybe a scammer and doesn't give a crap about breaking the law. Whereas my proposal was that the prohibition would be required of the phone company, who has to know the real information to be able to transmit the call. And they aren't overseas, they are subject to government regulation. They are going to follow the rules. There just aren't enough phone companies, and they're a small enough set of entities, and they're a well-regulated enough set of entities that the regulation can actually work against them.
Okay, so there's a small enough choke point there where it is feasibly enforceable.
Right. Yeah, but you can't feasibly enforce against caller, right? Yeah, the spam calls. They're coming from Russia. They're coming from Belarus. They're coming from wherever, and they're never going to follow an American law. They don't give crap about it. But eventually, they have to go through a U.S. company to get to your phone, and so I'm going to have the U.S. company enforce it.
Yeah, I see. Snorlax, were you around when this thread developed? Were you in there as well?
No, I'm not in here. I generally don't get involved, to be honest.
Oh, that's of course. Yeah, I remember we did talk about that in a previous episode.
It's kind of a habit at this point, though. I have been trying to. I've been looking out for posts that I feel like I can comment on, and because I'm a bit wary of appearing in any way biased as the top mod, I guess. But I read most posts, and I did read this one. Some of it's not quite, it's nothing I recognize, but with I think being American and etc. But yeah, it's interesting.
And is there anything different where you are in GMT as far as these kind of laws and rules? Do you have the same problems we do here with fake phone calls, sales calls, all that?
Well, if I'm being completely honest, I actually have never come across the idea before of like spoofing a number. I've only ever seen withheld numbers. So I honestly can't answer.
Okay. And so maybe it might be more of a US based question then, in a sense. Is that right to you, Peter?
Yeah, I don't know what. I think the phone system is UK specific. It would not be a European wide regulation on that, but I'm not 100%, and I don't know what the regulations they would have on spoofing would be, so I can't speak to it. I know the US shares a regulatory scheme for phone numbers with Canada and a bunch of Caribbean islands called the North American Numbering Plan.
Okay. So it could, then I guess it would be more of that zone than not just 48 states or 50 states.
You probably would have to do something within the whole zone just because it's that's one structure of, it has country code 1, very conveniently for Americans and very annoyingly for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you would have to probably do something within the whole North American numbering plan to make it feasible. But I think the US FCC is pretty dominant in governing that.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. I just wonder, like, in terms of that feasibility, I mean, is it just like getting to a handful of like meet me rooms that, like, is it all tied in with the same, the internet comes together, or is it more spread out?
So this was something, there was another Delta I gave way down in the thread, someone came to it like a day later almost, called VoIP CEO, who find their post so quickly, but they are a CEO of a VoIP company, and so they had a lot of very useful information on just how that system works.
That's pretty cool. We got an actual CEO of a VoIP company in the conversation. I think that's great, but go ahead.
Yeah, so that was very helpful, and they were explaining a lot about how they're going to buy service from. He mentioned that he buys service from Verizon, I think, and so, and that essentially that for his users, he has something called SIP, which is like an email address, and that would be the information he could verify, not any 10-digit number, and so that it would probably be a big problem for them to actually implement what I was proposing, given that necessity. Also, he was saying that a lot of users use different companies for incoming and outgoing calls, not individuals so much, but commercial users, where if I'm if I have a call center or something, I may have one company where I do my incoming calls and another company where I do my outgoing calls, or in a third company where I do my outgoing international, etc.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I see this as someone who's not as technically savvy, but I think of it as like on a pop-up, right? Like, I think, why can't my computer just have a rule that new internet windows only open when my mouse clicks, right? Like, under all of the circumstances, no new windows open. Like, that seems to me that's super simple. For reasons I don't understand, it's not. Like, with phone calls, I mean, wouldn't there be over time some kind of like on Twitter, you get a checkbox out there, okay, this is a real person. Like, couldn't I just set the phone to only get
the CEO person, he or she was saying that there's basically no authentication or verification that's built into the current system because it's built around an analog system from like the 70s or 80s.
Yeah.
And that it should be something like an internet-based system which can have verification and encryption and ensure that what's actually being said corresponds to something, but that it isn't, and you would basically need to fully do what I want. I think he said you basically need to rebuild the phone system from the ground up. Though I think we had a bit of back and forth, and I think there might be some version of this that's workable, but I understood it to actually be a lot harder to implement because of the essentially it's a 10-digit piece of text and a 16-digit piece of text are the two bits of caller ID data, and they're just plain text. Like, there's no verification, there's no checksum, there's just a 10-digit piece of plain text that goes with the call, and it's very, very hard to control that.
Right. Yeah, and if some listeners might be interested to see that so much of the internet itself did grow out of phone lines, and so you can see kind of in these buildings, you can see these old nests of phone line wires going in 1,000 directions, and then they started building on top of those with, the modems would go through phone lines again, and it's really, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the whole thing kind of almost just build up off of the phones, so it's harder to almost drill down into that.
The internet and the phone. So the internet used the phone system as a backbones of transmitting data for a long time. Now is pretty much all off of that.
Yeah.
But that's different from the structure of the system. So the phone line system, the phone system of I call a phone number, is still is still a kind of pretty antiquated system. Obviously, the routing and stuff is largely done digitally now, and companies put a lot of money into making that go efficiently. But the internet protocol system, where you have the IP addresses and IP, they went up to IPv6 recently because they ran out of IPv4s. That's all data driven, regardless of how you communicate. The phone system is just the how, or was the how, and now isn't anymore. Whereas it still is both the how and the what for actual telephone calls.
Yeah, so it's policy plus infrastructure.
Yeah. And then the last delta I gave in this thread was a very technical delta. I think it was, I forget who, but one of the other mods pointed out that I had said caller ID, and I was only referring to the phone number as opposed to the name. And the name is also part of caller ID because there's two parts. And so I gave them a very technical delta.
Oh, okay.
Because they were technically correct.
Correction delta, yeah. And it's on a scale of 1 to 10 delta, it's like a 2. Okay.
Not even a 2, just a 1.
Totally. Well, in this, so those, just to summarize for your deltas, then you had one very technical delta, one kind of saying, okay, this might be harder to fix than I initially thought. Was that as big as the change got for you, though?
Well, and one, there's a legitimate use for this that needs to be accounted for, which was the hospital example I gave. That was probably the biggest delta, was saying, because I had initially come in thinking that it was very, very uncommon to need to legitimately use spoofing, and I recognized after that for commercial users, it really is actually a pretty big necessity in many, many cases.
Yeah. Maybe it's just like we need like a ham radio license. It's like a spoofing license. It's like, okay, you're a hospital, you can spoof, like.
Yeah, you could have something like along those lines. Or I proposed, I'm not sure how workable it is, I asked the VoIP CEO person, and they were saying probably not as workable as I would like, that it has to be a number that you own, that the phone company knows that you own. So if I have 12 numbers and I say I want all my numbers to read as this one of those 12, that would be allowed. But if I say I want it to be this other number that's not one of my 12, then it wouldn't be. But that might not be so workable because he was saying you use a different company for ingoing and outbound in many cases.
Gotcha. Very cool. I'm just going to switch out of the screen share here. So Peter, I was thinking at this point we are 55 minutes in, and I was wondering if you had anything else you wanted to do before we go into our last segment, which is kind of a fun one if you want to stick around for it. But if there's anything you wanted to do on this item.
I'm okay. I don't think I have anything else to add on that thread. It was I got a lot more votes than I thought I would. I think because I picked up on something that's really annoying to people, and so they wanted to say I was right, at least with upvotes.
And I think my only other question was, and maybe it's for both of you, but what we see here is we see a specific problem common to a lot of people. Very few people know enough to sort of form an opinion either way, and then you have a discussion about the topic with an expert coming in to give useful, detailed technical knowledge that's relevant to the debate. Is there anywhere else on the internet you can find this sort of thing for this kind of arcane yet widely applicable problem or question?
I don't know. I feel like if I had gone into the VoIP, there is a VoIP subreddit that he mentioned that he usually hangs out in, or he or she hangs out in. And so I guess if I had gone there, I might have gotten that kind of very technical answer, but I don't know if it would have been as helpful, or it would have been structured in a way around changing my view of it, and being amenable to that. Because I feel like they may have just been, who's this annoying person who's telling us what to do?
Yeah.
Totally. All right. Well, then that's just another benefit of what happens in Change My View and why it's important those discussions are happening. So, well, great. Then if you're all good there, Peter, I'll just jump into our last segment. This is something we did last time too, and we might continue to do. And if you have any contributions, please say so. So it's basically finding a couple of threads from the last week that were fun, just that were not like a serious topic or perhaps even highly technical, but something that's like, the right way to, So Snorlax and I kind of zoomed in on a couple of from the top posts of last week, a couple of the more fun ones. So the first one here is change. This is submitted by a user ROAN180, Roan180. CMV, it should not be teeth paste. And so they presented a screen grab. So I'm going to do a screen share here of. So this person saw this on Twitter. It should be toothpaste, and you know it. So, and you should feel bad. And okay, so they go on to say a recent screen grab I've seen states that toothpaste should actually be teeth paste. I'm not sure where this conclusion comes from. Perhaps because it's a paste for your teeth rather than one tooth. Either way, we don't call it dishes washer, despite it washing multiple dishes rather than just one dish. Considering this is an example of a noun acting as an adjective, we must remember that adjectives don't mark for plurality in English. Please change my view. So, I don't think we have any deltas here, but anyone have strong opinions on this going in?
Well, it sounds weird. That's all I know. Toothpaste sounds weird. But had they started with toothpaste, then, I might think the other way. So maybe toothpaste would sound odd. Yeah,
there's a book by someone I was actually going to bring up earlier, which is Steven Pinker, who wrote The Better Angels Love by Nature, which is relevant to the better times, worse times question. But he also has a great book called How the Mind Works. And this other one was, I'm just totally blanking on the name, but the Blank Slate. But in both of those, he comes from a background of language analysis, and he drills down to these sort of subconscious logical things that our brain does, that heuristics it's operating on. And so when we have this feeling like that doesn't feel right, like you're saying, there's some underlying logic underneath it. And I think OP may be understanding what that is from, it sounds like they are some kind of English major background or something, but it's just fascinating that they've written an eloquent, assessment here with some, what appears to be some knowledge background, but it, I guess anyone interested in those deeper questions, How the Mind Works is a great one from Pinker. I'm sure, Peter, I'm sure you got some knowledge on some authors as well. That
linguistics and that sort of thing I have nothing on that.
Oh, okay.
I don't know linguistics. I will plead ignorance here.
I kind of agree with the tweet. The more I think about it, teeth paste. It does make sense.
It does brush teeth, but
yeah. So you're using it.
What if you only had one tooth? If you had lost all your teeth but one, would the substance just magically become toothpaste instead of toothpaste?
Toothpaste.
Like the toothpaste hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is teeth a way to cover the singular and the plural?
I feel like
no.
So I feel like if I'm going to debate this, I would say I'm trying to think of any time we do use a plural with a as the modifier. People always make a joke about a haircut, and that you get more than one haircut.
Well, what about a screwdriver? Most screwdrivers will screw more than one screw in there.
Not at a time.
Only one at a time. Yeah.
Okay. So if I had a toothbrush that was only the size of one tooth, then would that count?
Oh,
if I get the mini head, the circle one, or does the name of it change as it crosses the boundary between two teeth? And does the name change back when it's only sitting on one tooth? And
at which point going to become the toothbrush of thesis?
On my shelf. Sorry.
All right. I think we've made the toothbrush of thesis here. I think it's changing its nature as it goes along.
It's a crime against nature, really. It's a. All right, well, let me check out the other fun one, which was in 40 years, people will think of superhero movies the way we think of westerns from the 60s and 70s today. It's a little bit of a deeper question, but still kind of light and fun. Any thoughts on this one?
I think it depends on the idea that we don't already have a fairly low cultural opinion of superhero movies. I mean, not that I have anything particularly against superhero movies, but it's not like they have some highbrow cultural cachet currently. They're kind of already seen as a little bit just ridiculous action movies. Maybe some of the, some are better or worse, but for instance, the Transformers movies are routinely just critically panned. So I would say they probably will be thought of like we think of westerns, which is not in very high regard, but we don't think of them now in very high regard. And I don't think in the 60s and 70s people thought of westerns as particularly in high regard. Spaghetti westerns were a whole thing of these really low budget, low quality western movies made by an Italian guy.
What's interesting to me is growing up without westerns being current. I did have this feeling that Western films were kind of highbrow in a way, because it's like I didn't quite understand the entertainment value. Like I'd sit there and I wouldn't quite get what's entertaining about it, and I've kind of associated that feeling with being out of the loop and therefore kind of intellectually inferior because I don't quite get it, and therefore I'm not highbrow. It's the same with in a way with Shakespeare. I don't quite get it sometimes. If you're watching a play, it's like you can't keep up, so therefore I'm not highbrow enough. It's kind of a similar feeling.
Yeah. Well, my instinct on this is to swap out the word westerns for something like jazz or rock and roll
or glam rock. Was it glam rock ever like at the time were people looking at it as like a great thing?
And I think it's like many things. I think it's the only westerns I'm going to see are going to be really good ones. Likely, right? So the only comic book movies people in the future are going to see are going to be probably the better ones. And so I think there's like an uncanny valley of like the period when it came out at the time of the westerns. Let's say, okay, the fans of them are watching even the bad and the literally the good, the bad, and the ugly of them, right? But over time, there's like a slump period where they look back on them with some sense of irony, or that was dumb, and then it comes back into popularity again, but maybe only the best ones are looked back on now with enough nostalgia distance.
There's rose-tinted glasses. Same with music,
exactly. Yeah,
only the good music makes it through.
Also, just as far as if you skim, as I think Mihat was saying, if you skim off the best 5% of them, they're going to look like, oh, these are really good. But it's just because you're skimming off the best 5% over a decade or two period when you had a bunch of them come out, most of them were crappy, but a few were good. Yeah.
Like I think in the 90s, people might have looked at 80s music as like, too campy and lacking irony or depth. And then and then in the 2000s, people might look at the 90s as too like emo or whiny or like, I don't know. There's some aspect that you can paint a broad brush on if you're just the next generation, right? But now 80s music is seen as like, oh, we remember the best stuff, and some of that's really cool. And you start to look at the historical context and the innovations of things that like Bowie did or whatever. And then now people are starting to look at 90s music as like, wow, what they did in Seattle was amazing. This whole new thing with grunge, there's a laundering period before it becomes not mocked, but then maturing into nostalgic goodness, I guess. I don't know.
And then
I always wonder if that period though is shrinking. Like, is that period of time shrinking? Like as we move into the future, we're getting more and more stuff faster. Does the time it takes for something to be appreciated again? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and also things get like reused, things come back into fashion, etc. So then I think it's kind of happened with westerns, with Quentin Tarantino's Hateful Eight.
Mhm.
You know, I personally, I'm kind of tired of superhero movies already. So yeah, maybe things will come back around.
Yeah. Well, is it that, and that gut thing is important too. Like, are you feeling like, okay, we've kind of wrung this one out, you know, like we're coming up on what, 20 movies or something in the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
And also for me, I don't mind them so much as I don't mind the fact that there's sequels. That kind of feel like they're rehashing. It just feels like a money grab, you know.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I at one point when they came out with the new Spider-Man recently, I had forgotten that it was the third reboot of Spider-Man in like a relatively short period of time. I had missed the entire second reboot of Spider-Man and did not know that had happened and it had been like a movie trilogy. And I feel like at the point where I can have just, in my adult lifetime, have had one reboot of Spider-Man, then that had a trilogy, and then they did another one, and I didn't even notice it, and then a third one came out. I feel like you're going too fast at that point. You can't reboot it after 3 years. That's not a reboot. That's just insanity.
Yeah,
it's a lot of attempts, but is there an argument to say it's like Edison trying to get the light bulb to work? You know, is it just keep at it until you get it right?
What, for the platonic ideal of a Spider-Man movie?
You know, don't mistake the finger for the moon. You know, but I think the aspiration to get it just right.
I honestly think they messed up with Spider-Man somewhere in some contracts or something. They had to, you know, I don't think it was their intention to reboot it 3 years later. I think they've messed up somehow because it just doesn't make sense. Like, there's no attachment to the character. But you know, at the same time,
I think it's because everyone just wants to tell the one same story with Spider-Man of the origin story, and then it gets boring because it's just the same villains and he wins.
Yeah.
And so everyone wants to just go back to that well of the origin story, which is a good movie. Mm-hmm. But you can't make the same movie 10 times and have it be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I think in the newer one though, they did kind of skip a lot of the intro, right? They're with the latest iteration of Spider-Man. I think I'm staying on the right side of spoilers here, but I feel like we got a lot less of the. Well, I mean, I guess a lot less of it. Like if we were to, like with the new Superman, Batman, we didn't get a ton of like Batman's parents, right? Or
yeah, I feel like there happened a lot too much.
Okay, yeah. Well, I do think there's one thing with these movies that I do think is a huge achievement in a way. I mean, if you look at like Pixar's history, you know, all of their movies are above what, like 82 at the lowest in Rotten Tomatoes or something, but they're somehow capable of consistently putting out like good stuff. And you know, I'd say the average MCU movie is not as high as the average Pixar movie, but I still think they stay pretty well above, let's say, 80. And over 20 movies, I think that's an achievement, especially when you're trying to tell grand tales in the classic, you know, hero arc, and playing with new ways to do the hero arc between different movies and what you know and what you don't already know, and innovating that in a way for a modern audience that gets, you know, tens of thousands more hours of story than humans would have in the past. I think we're seeing like a workshop in a sense, like a mythos development workshop, and it's all building up to the big Thanos thing. And I don't know if they just stop at that point though. Like, do you stop and just call it, or do you keep spinning off? I don't know.
I feel like the economic force to keep spinning off is too strong, which is probably part of the problem. So with Pixar, you know, you're pointing out they have very good ratings. I don't think Pixar has ever made a movie that is derivative content.
Very good point.
I don't think they've ever used a character that was not a Pixar original character.
Except for Mr. Potato Head.
Well, but Mr. Potato Head is a toy. Not a, But yeah, I don't think they've had a character who's like, so they're a very good movie studio, but that doesn't really tell us anything about, because if you had a genre of superhero movies that was just inventing new superheroes all the time, I think that would be a very different thing from the genre of literally the same cast or the same set of 10 super identifiable names and another 25 or 30 supporting identifiable names. They're just tapping the well of these names over and over again that have these brands. And that's the only reason I can think to do that is because they want to make a bunch of money because people recognize the name and are willing to go see it.
Well, is there value in that though? If in a sense, we're, if you're in some ancient time hearing a story of, Isis or Vishnu or, like you might have these recurring characters of, like let's say Krishna, right? Who seems to pop up in different stories over time. In like 1,000 years apart or something, in some battle suddenly he shows up or some manifestation of him. And, oh, there he is again, or there's that trickster god again. Like, is this just feeding a naturally adaptive thing of wanting to have a familiar set of characters that represent each archetype? Your trickster and your hero and your mentor.
I can certainly see a case for that. I would say, for instance, in Western European culture, we have basically about a millennium where all art is fan art of Jesus.
I have not thought of it like that.
But it is. I mean, it's Jesus, the apostles, Mary, every piece of visual art for about 1,000 years, or not every, but almost every one, is the same cast of 10 characters or 20 characters from the Bible. And if you drew anyone else, you probably went to jail.
I wonder if that was the Renaissance, was people finally just getting like jaded on the same story. They're like, can we just bring back some like throwback to the Greeks or something? Something
the Sistine Chapel. That's a very famous Renaissance work. It's Jesus. It's God. It's all the same thing. So I don't think there's anything unusual about going back to the same cast of characters, and I understand why it's economically successful. I just don't think it's very especially interesting art.
Yeah. Well, then to dial it back to change my view, is there anything with the subreddit that we were ever in danger of repeating old stories, old archetypes?
God, yes. It's well established that it's one of the more annoying aspects of the subreddit. The same 8 or 10 views come up almost daily. If not quite actually daily, but there's a staple of things. Usually, almost always something about transgender, something about Donald Trump. We have a lot of repeat subjects, and I can see how it gets frustrating for people who are coming. So I understand it from the perspective of the person coming in. They're new to the forum, and this is what they want to talk about. But they're political, well-known issues, so a lot of people want to talk about them. But if you're someone who hangs out on Change My View, it gets old pretty fast.
You know what? If I was, okay, let's say I'm the KGB, right? And I want to essentially do the project of stirring up the election and getting Americans to, essentially the goal from the big analysis they did was to undermine American support, like stability and belief in democracy, essentially, right? They design these ads to ping at people in a way to maybe like show a straw man version of the other side's argument. Look at this person yelling that's a snowflake, or look at this person that's a oppressive, too conservative person or whatever.
Nazi.
And you can almost, if I'm the KGB, I would go to Change My View and I would look at which topics repeat and get upvoted a lot. And then I get like a total pulse. Like I could feel the pulse of what gets under people's skin enough to get upvoted, and then just feed to those topics and find the most like outrageous ways to describe those topics in ways that get under people's skin. Because a lot of times it wasn't just ads for against a candidate. It was these subtle ways of tweaking people's premises or, what pisses them off, if I'm interpreting the summaries I've encountered of the.
Yeah, I think also it depends a little. I think there also may be a bit of the American intelligence community likes to play up the threat of the KGB a bit in terms of having a big adversary they can want to fight against. I don't necessarily believe the KGB is that competent. I think they were trying to do that, and I think they in some ways succeeded. But if you ask me, like, is the KGB incredibly competent at keeping the pulse of American society, I would say that they are not. And you saw stuff, for instance, with the Clinton hacks, which also is one of the never-ending repeat topics, especially was during the election, but still comes up a lot with the people talking about the Russian interference. They were pretty sloppy in hacking the DNC. They did a bunch of stuff. The spear phishing they used against John Podesta, they used the same Bitly compressor for a bunch of other stuff, which let them be identified. So they weren't, the KGB, they're aggressive and they're not nice people, but I don't think they're particularly like, there's some gods of intelligence and, that can't be dealt with in some ways.
Totally. Very cool. Well, we are 17 minutes over at this point. So I just check in with you guys, see if there's anything else you want to get into or touch on before we go.
I was just going to say about that.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
The question beforehand. I think in terms of repeated topics, I think it depends if you're looking at Change My View as a source of entertainment versus a kind of service. Which, so, I can understand there's lots of people there who are kind of, they enjoy Change My View. They enjoy the interactions and the chance to convince other people. And so with that comes you get tired of seeing the same things over and over again. I guess like how I've tried to view it throughout all of this is that each individual person has their own set of circumstances and background that led to that view, even though the view might be identical to someone else. They could have come there to that conclusion on on a different path, and therefore each post can take its own twists and turns, and something that worked for one person doesn't work for the other necessarily. So I kind of see it as a service, in a sense.
Well, if we can get a category as a utility, maybe we can. No, go ahead.
I understand that, and I would tend to agree that each post has everyone's coming from their own perspective, and you have to deal with them individually. I think just as far as having it be an effective service, there has to be some it has to be workable enough for the people who are providing the service of doing the view changing, who are going to tend to be regular. So that's as far as, are you going to have people responding to your thread? Are you going to have meaningful engagement?
Yeah.
Also, I did notice before I made a mistake and kept referring to the KGB, which doesn't technically exist anymore and is now the FSB. So it's really the same.
I began that mistake, so you can point it back to me.
Also, just a point, I guess. I totally agree with that. We've got to keep the people who are like driving the community. We've got to keep them interested, and I guess that's the whole purpose of Fresh Topic Friday. And actually, to begin with, I wasn't totally on board with the idea of Fresh Topic Friday, but another moderator changed my view of it essentially. And I was reading the other day the conversation. I think it happened a couple of years ago, which I could quickly get up if you like.
Yeah.
Because see, I guess my reasoning was that because I guess in that idealistic way, I didn't even like the idea of there being one day where people couldn't talk about certain things, because in my mind it meant that was a day where we could miss out on changing some people's views, which like 1/7 of the week is like we're turning someone away, and that kind of worried me a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so I think about a year ago, I convinced the mod team to put it to the community to like see if they were really on board with the Fresh Topic Friday thing, and see if it was something they wanted us to keep around. So I'm just scrolling through here to find, it was a comment by Goran Teller, I believe.
Well, and just while you're looking at that, I'll do some, maybe a little bit of what would be the housekeeping end notes here. So just for those listening, we're still workshopping this live version of the podcast to see if we can eliminate the delays that have been happening in editing. So it'll continue to be rough, but hopefully improve with each week, and hopefully get a little more advanced notice. That's for you, Grunt08. And yeah, we'll keep at it. And great to have huadpe here, the unpronounceable again. And is everything going good with you, Peter?
Yeah, I'm fine here.
Cool. Very cool.
Okay.
All right.
I
How are
found
you
it.
doing there?
I found it. Yeah. So basically, in this post, I kind of put forward that I didn't want to stop Fresh Topic Friday. I just wanted to be convinced of it. I wanted to be on, running the subreddit with you guys. I wanted to be on board with the idea of Fresh Topic Friday. And so Gone Teller posted a comment. He said, "Oh, okay, here's the way I see it. Let's say we're running a music club with an open mic structure. Every day except Friday, we let people play whatever songs they want. Some good, some bad, but wide open. On Fridays, though, we have a rule: no covers. All music needs to be original. Now, that's not going to guarantee higher quality. And yes, there is original music interspersed throughout the week. Now, some performers who play covers and only covers might be frustrated because they can't play on that one night, and understandably so. And yes, there will be fewer performers since fewer have new material. But Fridays are special to those who like original music. At least some people love experiencing that immersion in stuff they haven't heard before. They might like the other stuff too, but knowing that they aren't going to have to sit through the 10,000 playing of that damn overdone cover that you never liked all that much to begin with is a great feeling. I think it also shows that we as a community value new material. It doesn't mean that we can't appreciate well done covers, but originality is important too if we don't want people to drift away. And so I acknowledge that this was a good metaphor, but the only problem I had, like I've just mentioned before, is that I've been approaching this whole discussion from a public service standpoint. I can't shake the feeling that if Fresh Topic Friday prevents even one case of a bigoted view being changed or a common one being explored in a way that finally works for a reader, then CMV isn't reaching its full potential. Someone not being able to play a cover at the original's only night isn't going to have any downside since they can come back another day. And yes, I realize this could be the same case for those who want to discuss the review on Friday, but I think it's different. Playing live music is enjoyable and rewarding for a lot of people. Maybe the OP on Friday just had an impulsive desire that won't be present next week. And so he commented back, this comment changed my view, and I was on board. So he said, well, I'd say there are two considerations. First, how many people have that view only on Friday and can't be bothered to post it on any other day of the week? Or in metaphor speak, are only willing to play the club on Friday. Second, if the goal is to get your view changed, but there are fewer regulars who are the view changing experts because they get frustrated with the repetition, doesn't that make it less likely the view is going to change? And so, and then that just clicked with me. I guess the view changing is totally dependent on there being people who want to hang around, and therefore, if the people need a fresher day, then that's fine with me. That was my conclusion.
Gotcha. And so it remains.
Yes, and I'm happy with it now.
Very cool. We'll see that's kind of, I think, in introspections is going to always be good for us, though. To you asked the question, okay, is this working? Is it worth keeping? Good. The analysis is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's healthy to have these conversations, and I think we might be posting one tomorrow. Getting back on that, we haven't spoken to the community for a while, so it'd be good to open that up again.
Okay, very cool. Well, I guess then we'll maybe keep an eye out to see if you end up posting that one idea you had there, Peter.
All right, yeah. I'm afraid of it because Bitcoin gets a lot of people riled up.
Okay. But I'm posting the links to the fun topics that we just went through as well in the comments of the sticky post, and then after this, Snorlax and I will handle sort of the back end stuff here to get all the podcast links and everything going. So
okay, and I'll send you a few links for the book I was talking about before, and a couple of papers on how secretly printing a bunch of money helped the German economy in the 30s.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. And are you just gonna post it in the thread then?
Yeah, I can do that. That works.
Okay, cool. Because I just think that might be.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, cool. Okay, because I think I emailed you from like a different email account than the one I would normally see because I'm logged in as Change My View right now. So.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll put it on Reddit.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, any last words? Everyone good to go?
Yeah. Well, I would just say another reminder to leave any feedback you have. It's much appreciated. I think I might try and seek out some, an OP or a commenter to come on board next time, though it's tricky to schedule. But yeah, just let us know your thoughts on going forward. Are you playing the outro music?
There it is. Yeah. I'm playing you off, guys. All right. Well, thank you.
I'm on the stage. I'm being dragged off now.
Right. I'd like to thank Google and Facebook. And, all right. All right. Thanks so much for coming on
Twitter at the CMV Podcast.
Yeah. Come back to you next week, and we'll or listen to this later. If you're listening to this later, thanks for checking us out. All right. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.